Hello and welcome to this Blueprint collaboration interview at Arper. Today I'm talking to the co-founder of an internationally renowned architectural practice based in New York City. The practice has a wealth of amazing projects, award-winning projects in fact, to its portfolio, but it is probably best known for a piece of urban regeneration which has been mimicked the world over. Today I'm going to be talking to Liz Diller.
Collaboration means discourse, sharing. It means finding something that is unexpected because of potential partnerships and discussions. It means exchanging expertise. And I do it all the time, so it's so variable depending on the type of project. When we started the studio, it was just Rick Scofidio and myself. And I didn't know how to share anything. I didn't know how to collaborate. And so we were a couple, but I actually didn't know how to share a bed and I didn't know how to share a bank account. So I had a lot of learning to do around what partnerships were to be about and how to really work together. Rick and I truly started to work together as a partnership from the 80s through the 90s, and we did it in a way, usually in fistfights, and we're always trying to get at something that's sort of gnawing in the back of your head, but you don't know exactly what it is. It takes someone else to really bring it out. And the way Rick and I have worked over the years together is one person, Rick, may be doing a project that I'm barely involved in, and I say something and totally twist the way that he will do it. That's a collaboration as well. But most of the time, we're sort of fighting with each other. With Charles and Ben, who joined the firm across 2000, and then just more recently with Ben's partnership, we basically are very familiar with each other. We don't dance around issues, we're not careful. We basically are trying to get to the best idea. And sometimes that means that 3 other people are bloody on the floor. One is victorious, usually because they have the best idea, and the other ones will admit it. Very often, the way we would start a project is we get a brief, or we make up the brief, because we're not only problem solvers, we're problem makers. And it's usually abstract from the beginning. We try to also understand that we're usually not the first at the table to arrive at a problem. There's a history there, usually an architectural history that preceded us, and it's important to understand where ideas come from. So we're taking on a new cultural facility, let's say, something like the Shed. A new cultural institution. Well, so what preceded us? What are the references? Where is our territory to break free? And then the process is variable. Sometimes there's analysis, sometimes there's a lot of testing. There's also a healthy amount of intuition and just sort of things, imaginings that you somehow just want to see. And usually there's a kind of agglutination that shakes out and is edited, and a project comes out of all of that. I see collaboration because I think it makes for better work. And it's a good way to test your ideas, to bounce ideas off of, and to really find more than the sum of 1 + 1. So there was a competition that was held by the city for the High Line, and we formed a team with James Corner, Field Operations, and Pete Udolph to do the entire project. But we didn't divide up the work, like the horticulture is this person, and landscape is James, and we're doing the architecture. We put this together as a holistic idea about this new transformation of this industrial piece of detritus, I guess the city thought of it that way. So when we had our interview, and this is recounted by the Friends of the Highline, led by Robert Hammond, that was the citizen activist that actually sort of got the city to be interested. So he recounted the interview in which we were there with the city officials and the Friends of the Highline, and James, and our studio. And he said that we were really very charming. The way that we interacted with each other was very charming, and it was one of the reasons that we won the project. That basically we disagreed with each other. That not only did Rick and I disagree with each other, but Rick and I and James disagreed with each other. And then we disagreed with Robert Hammond, who was on the jury. And we were very sort of free to discuss those things. And they really liked that about us, that we didn't have this preconceived idea that was totally fixed, that we were thinking on the spot, and that we were sort of genuinely collaborating, which means that we didn't have a packaged, slick presentation. Ideas don't just come from God, they don't come from the heavens. And I think that ideas come from really, really hard work. And sometimes it's very, very hard to manage that work solo. It takes longer to get there. And what's really great about working with other people that you respect is they, and when they're not intimidated by the conversation, often it is combative, it's that you get somewhere, you challenge each other, and you're thinking on the spot, and it's fresh. And you don't really necessarily believe in what you're putting out there, but you're testing ideas. And I think that the most creative ideas and solutions really come that way. They don't come from necessarily just plotting and thinking hard about a problem. It comes usually from like the 99% of garbage that comes out of discussions and tests, and then something crystallizes out of somewhere. And it could be out of the most unexpected person or in an unexpected way. Or working collaboratively, also with communities, and really trying to understand the problem of the problem of the problem, and figuring out how to address it, and not by parachuting in and thinking that your preconceived ideas are going to work, but by truly opening up your brain, you get to really good solutions. Since our practice began, we began collaborating with artists, and especially with theater artists, writers for theater, choreographers, and other kinds of performers. But also, by the way, scientists and mountain climbers and programmers, and a lot of people from the digital world, robotics experts, and so forth. In our theatrical work, the work has never been that the architect does the set. It's not like that. In this case, and since we began, we always come up with content. We're very interested in content, and we're very drawn to collaborations where everyone starts on the same footing with the same question mark in front of them. And we bring our expertise into it, but we work together to do the same thing. I dreamed up this notion of the mile-long opera, and it came really from a sense that this piece, this urban performance, needed to be made. And if it wasn't going to be by me, it had to be by somebody else. The content and the objective of it was a very close look at the evolution of the city and the speed of change in the contemporary city, and the effect that it had on citizens. So it was out in urban space and a 1.5 mile long outdoor park on city territory, And the idea was to bring in a composer, David Lang, and a couple of writers, and then to evolve the cast. And so David Lang was a fantastic collaborator. Really, a year or two in, we started to really share ideas about how to structure this project. The notion of 1,000 singers stretched along the High Line came out of this collaboration. We then brought in Anne Carson, a poet, great poet, and Claudia Rankin, another great poet, to write the words. And those words came out of interviews, 500 pages of interviews with the residents of New York. So it was translated a little bit poetically by them, but it was stuff that was collected. And then we started to cast basically what turned out to be 1,000 singers, 40 choirs from all over New York, some professional singers, maybe 250, 750 amateur singers that we had to rehearse and teach the music to, rehearse, and have them have their first opportunity on the stage of being in this very unusual situation. I raised all the money myself and got all the approvals. My studio got very involved to get all the city approvals. So it was a very, very complicated project. And I acted as a creative, as a creator, as a director, and as a producer. But you know, I also know my limitations. So I asked Lindsay Peisinger, who works with Marina Abramovich, to help have the dialogue with the singers and to help communicate the thoughts. And so this is always the case. It's like I always sort of step out of the airplane without a parachute, and then I realize, oops, I need a little bit more equipment, and then make a soft landing at the end. MoMA begins as a collaboration with living and dead architects. MoMA was founded in 1929 in an existing building, residential building. And then Edward Durrell Stone and Goodwin and Stone were commissioned to do the first building that opened in 1939. And that was sort of the anchor. Philip Johnson added in 1964 a couple of wings, and then Caesar Pelli added more space, and then Taniguchi added even more space in around 2004. And then there was a site that was vacated by some friends of ours that are actually living with a building that had to be demolished, unfortunately, because it was no longer of use. It was a folk art museum, abandoned. And then next door, the tall residential building by Jean Nouvel, of which MoMA had the lower floors as an extension of the collections. So when we began that project, we knew that, wow, there's a lot of history here, there are a lot of logics here, and we had to not only expand the museum, but we had to coordinate all these logics that came from as far back as 39. The chief curators and Glenn Lowry, the director, were part of the conversation right from the beginning. What does MoMA really want to do going forward? How does it want to tell the stories of modernism? Because it used to tell a kind of singular story, and now it's a very different MoMA. So all the departments they're still represented, but they're collaborating now together, and they're not spatially divided as they used to be. So how do you tell those stories? What's the best way to treat the galleries? Where are the temporary shows? Where are the collection shows? How do we extend the collections that are already there in a smart way? And this meant, really a lot of dialogue throughout the process. And so I would say, and our architectural collaborator was Gensler, Maddie Burke, that we worked with very, very closely at realizing everything, worked as a really, really tight team. And also all of our consultant teams, our technical consultants along the way that helped to really make something that was very, very hard. It's a big institution. It also has a huge legacy. It has a building committee and a board and lots of personnel, staff, collaborators, that many committees. And we were able to really together pull it off.